J. Warner Wallace is a cold case homicide detective who's been investigating cold case murders in Los Angeles County for over a decade. His work has been featured on Fox News, Dateline, and Court TV. Now, we join him as he applies his investigative skills to making a case for Christianity.
Thanks for joining us at Cold Case Christianity. I am J. Warner Wallace. We're going to rabbit trail a little bit this week because I got an email that really started me thinking a little bit about how best people like you and I, people who are interested in Christianity, people who maybe are already Christians and we want to submit our lives to the Great Commission where we tell others about the good news, where we share the gospel with others, where we make a case for Christianity with others. If you're someone who's been watching channels like this one, or reading books, or looking at websites, and you're kind of interested in the case for Christianity, and you've kind of been wondering, well, how do I get involved? I mean, why are you reading and watching all of that material to begin with? Isn't it because you have a sense that you ought to take it and shift from being a content consumer to a content creator? Even if the only content you're creating is the conversation you're about to have with somebody you really care about at the office, or somebody you really care about in your social setting, or somebody you really care about online. I mean, isn't that what you're preparing yourself to do, is to make that shift from just learning to helping to show the truth to others? So the question I have, I got an email that started all this, is which is a better approach to take in reaching culture? Books, writings, or videos? Which is better? Which is more effective? Which is going to shape the future more dramatically? I only ask that because, let's face it, I wonder sometimes if the art of reading is now a lost art. How many people are actually reading? I don't know. I mean, that's something I haven't really studied, but I am an author, and I'm an author first. And I got an email from somebody here on YouTube who is a content creator, an apologist on YouTube, who asked me, apparently they were making a presentation, making a case for the future of apologetics on YouTube, and they were asking me for my book sale numbers. In other words, the comparison, what I'm sure was going to be made, hey, I can reach millions on YouTube that I can't reach by way of a book because YouTube has a much further reach than do books. And I started thinking about, well, as a guy who's now getting a little bit older and I'm just finished my 8th book, the question then becomes, well, all right, so which should I shift my efforts? What should you do if you're somebody who's interested in making a case for Christianity beyond just to your friends? And I've often said that, look, folks, if you learn enough from YouTube, from books, from articles on websites, to be able to defend what you believe to others, it's time for you to shift with your unique skill set, your unique personal history, your testimony. It's time for you to shift and make the case to others. Given your unique skill set, and everyone's got one, you have an audience that I can't reach because you have a unique experience in your life that you can use as the platform from which you will share the gospel. So I've always said, hey, it's not just people who are authoring books who need to think about writing. It's not just people who got a contract with, ID Channel or National Geographic who should be doing video. It's time for all of us to get in the game. So here's the question. Which is the best way to reach the culture? Books or video? Now, I'm taking that email that I received from the person on YouTube seriously, because it seems to me that the reason why we're having to make a case for the effectiveness of YouTube is that there's some sense, a disparaging sense, that YouTube is just, it's YouTubers. Okay, I understand why we would want, let's put it this way. It's kind of like people who are making the case, if I said to you, I'm a podcaster, I've got a podcast. Or I said to you, I have a nationally syndicated talk show. Now, my podcast reaches a national audience. Or I could be the host of a nationally syndicated radio talk show. Which of those two do you think would you say, oh, well, that kind of seems like it's a little more reliable in terms of authority? I think you would probably say it's the nationally syndicated talk show host. Because let's face it, right now, podcasting is exploding. And if you've got a microphone, you can even record it into your phone. You can pretty much set up a podcast by tonight. Anyone and everyone's got a podcast, it seems. And that's also true for videos. Everyone and anyone can get a YouTube channel. So the question is, what's good about both? And I want to break this show today in half First, I want to talk in the first half before the break just about what is the best approach, what is so good about video, and I think there's lots of good things about video. And then the second half, and we'll talk about some of the downside also. And then the second half, we'll look at another perspective of writing books. Now, a couple of things before we begin. One, when I say writing books, I do not mean, and don't get mad at me, I'm going to say it right now, I don't mean self-published books. I'm talking about books where somebody else spends their money to get your book printed. If we're still spending our own money to get our stuff printed, this is a whole, look, I understand that we have now shifted. There are some excellent ways to self-publish a book, but let's be honest, most people, if they said I'm an author, but it's from J. Warner Wallace Publishing, you might say, well, wow, that is kind of like saying I have a podcast instead of a nationally syndicated talk show. So the question becomes, like, now, whether that's fair or not, that is the reality of it. There's a difference between self-publishing and publishing on through a traditional publisher. And look, I don't know if I've ever talked about that on this broadcast, but I think that from my perspective, I usually almost always will tell people, if you can publish with a publisher instead of self-publishing, publish with the publisher, and we'll talk about that in the second half. But here's my point. If you're somebody right now, you're thinking, well, I'm not making video and I'm not writing books, stand by. You ought to at least consider hopping in the game. I'm just going to give you some direction on which of these two approaches is best maybe for you, and it'll have the most impact on culture. Quickly, let's talk about YouTube. Here's the good thing about YouTube. It is, or any video you create, to be on any platform. And look, you must realize I'm invested in video because you're watching me in that format right now, and you know I've got an NRB TV show and I've got a YouTube channel. What's great about it is it's immediate. The minute I finish this broadcast, I can render it and put it on YouTube. It's pretty fast. And I am in complete control. Anyone can do it. That's the beauty. This has been a ground leveler. I do not have to wait to get a nationally syndicated show on the old-fashioned cable networks or on on the national networks, and then hope that somehow I can build an audience of 500,000 people. There are people we know right now who have a bigger audience than that, and all they've ever done is do this. So it turns out that it's great. It's immediate. Anyone can do it. I'm not going to have to go through the traditional vetting of having to earn the right to do it. Anyone can do it, and your talent alone can elevate you to whatever level you're going to be elevated to based on your talent. Here's the other thing, too, and compared to books, there are many more views. You're going to get many more eyeballs on the work with video than you are with books. Believe it or not, few of us write Christian books and sell 1 million copies. Most are far less than that. And you can get 1 million views if a video goes viral. So you can get, if you look at your entire channel, if you've got numbers of views of videos, your collective eyeballs on your content is much greater than it's ever going to be at the book. That's just the truth of it. Another good thing about it is you can do this by yourself. You buy a camera, you buy a microphone, you log on. If you can pay the internet, you can upload your videos. You do not need a staff to do it. Many of these folks do have help, but if you're like me, you can just do this with your own equipment. So that's another good thing about it. You have international reach instantly. There are subtitles for your videos. If there are English speakers, the good thing about speaking English is it's got a pretty broad international audience, and there are people who speak English all over the world. So there's no boundaries when it comes to YouTube. You can actually access those people. That's pretty cool, because if you think about publishing, it might be a long time before your book is deemed worthy enough to translate into another language. You don't have to have any expertise. What I mean is, if you wanted to write a book and you follow the traditional, let's say you're a biblical scholar and you have been trained and you've been vetted, you've got a master's and a PhD, and you've been serving at a university for a number of years, and you propose a book to a publisher, well, they're going to think, wow, he's got all this, or she's got all this expertise, you've got all this background and training, you've got an audience for this, you could actually issue the book as part of your curriculum. I mean, there's that's when you get the book deal. Well, you don't need any of that. You can be a guy like me. Yes, I have a master's degree in theology, but to be honest, I don't need it to do this. You could say, I'm just an engineer, and my engineering experience tells me I know how to puzzle things together and see how systems work, and I can tell you where design exists and where design does not. I can tell you what's a good design, what's a bad design from my years of engineering. And now you can start launching a station, or a channel rather, on YouTube where you're talking about design and the inferences from design in biology that maybe will point toward God. You don't have to have in other words, if you had none of that, but you just were charismatic on the screen, you could start a channel. There are lots of those. So you can tell that you don't have to have expertise in order to do this. Getting the book deal is a little bit different than that. You're going to have some expertise that carves you out as a unique, reliable authority before a publisher is going to give you a chance. I'm looking at my list here, so please bear with me. You can interview people in a way that's really hard. Look at what Lee Strobel has done in the Case 4 books. He goes out and he does these interviews. I've been one of those interviews. I can only imagine how hard those books are. He's got to travel to all these interviews. He takes copious notes. He records 4 or 5 different ways. He transcribes, he retranscribes. It's not easy. Just flip on a camera with a split screen on Skype and you can pretty much do an interview that anybody can assess and can access, and I'll tell you that it's pretty cool how fast you can do interviews. It's much easier on video than it is to take the time to write them up in the book. A downside, though, is that this is a very distracted, noisy environment. So when you read a book, you have access to just that writer, and you don't have the noise in the sidebar, you don't have the distractions, you don't have the pop-up ads, you don't have any of that distracting environment. So there is one downside to video, is that there are lots of distractions in video. The other problem you're going to have, I think a little bit of a challenge, is it's much easier to get caught up in the numbers on video, because platforms like YouTube will give you instantaneous numbers in terms of how many people are viewing it and how many people are subscribing to your station and how long they're viewing you don't get those kinds of numbers as an author except about once every 6 months. So if you're somebody who's going to be taken up and distracted by constantly watching your numbers to see how fast your audience is growing, well, video platforms have a tendency to amplify that. As a matter of fact, I know lots of people, like I talked about in the podcast recently the broadcast related to the challenge of celebrity. I know lots of people who have gotten caught up in just that number crunching. It's like you don't respect sometimes pastors who are just focused on how many people attend. Well, I know lots of content creators who are more focused on how many people are watching and what they can produce to increase that number than they are about other issues. That's just the truth of it. Now, the other thing about YouTube or any kind of video is that very few channels on YouTube, at least the apologetics channels that I'm watching, are driven by the content of the host alone. Far more are derivative. What I mean is they are interviewing somebody. They're dependent upon the existence of the people they are consistently interviewing. They themselves would not be able to do enough content to go out by themselves over a long period of time. So they find themselves interviewing people who can provide that type of content. And so they are largely interview platforms. And who are they interviewing? Mostly authors. So it turns out there's another limitation, I think, of video. It's short form. I think it's largely, at least the way I'm seeing it right now, not everyone, some very large channels are not derivative, but many are mostly derivative. They're dependent upon what kinds of interviews they can get. Okay, in most video platforms online, the real product is not the videographer who's saying something, it's you, the viewer, because the platform is selling you to advertisers. And so you'll see this always if you're engaging in video the way it's constructed now online. It's like social media, where the viewer is the product that's being sold by the platform to advertisers. At some point, that gets old. I don't know if you've noticed that your stream, your set of recommendations on the side of your videos you're watching seems to be tailored to your interests. You know why? Because they know what your interests are. They've been monitoring you, and they are selling you to advertisers. If only they are other YouTubers that they think will watch. They want to keep you on the platform. So there's a sense in which the platforms in which you post videos are rather manipulative. So that's just the reality of it. You won't have that problem, of course, in the book world. It's not always a free speech platform, but let's face it, sometimes books aren't either. If Amazon decides, for example, it doesn't want to sell your book, there's a large chance that nobody's going to buy it. But there are other ways to sell it, right? But you don't own the platform you're broadcasting on, and they can monitor and limit what you say. So just keep that in mind. What's good about it, though, is it's a visual communication technique in a largely visual culture, and it's creating a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? It's creating its own increasingly visual culture because the platform increases our desire to see more. Look, it's amazing to me that podcasts like mine, where NRB TV say, "Hey, would you just throw on a camera and do your regular podcast, but videotape it?" Well, why would anybody want to watch the video? Well, it turns out people do. And because we become visual. If you can hear them say it, great. But if you can watch them say it, especially if it's short enough, you might do that. So this is one way to capitalize on an increasingly visual culture. It does, though, something that I think is worth considering. It promotes a celebrity culture within Christianity far, far, far greater than books do. You can have a great book. I'm interested in you not knowing about me. I'm interested in you knowing about the contents of the book. As an author, I want you to read that book because I think there's something in it that's worth knowing. Now, in the end, if you don't know what Jim Wallace looks like or who J. Warner Wallace looks like, that's fine with me. But these platforms, video platforms, feature the guy that's in this rectangle right now, or the gal who's in this rectangle right now. These have a tendency, this form of communication amplifies us, our facial expressions, what we look like, what's in the background of my office. That becomes the celebrity rather than the content. And so if nothing else, even if the content is key, you're going to be driven along with the content as the celebrity in front of the content in a way that is foreign to books. Let's see. So that does celebrate the celebrity culture in a way that I want to try to minimize. It's immediately engaged by comments, and that can be a very good thing. It can also be a very bad thing. There's so much vitriol on video that if you read the comment section, I monitor my comment section. When someone cusses on the other side of the issue, I don't post it. And I'll be honest with you, that's about 40% of what I see in the comment section are people screaming. On both sides, they don't get posted. Sorry, I'm not going to have my comment section full of vitriol. That's my choice. Not everyone does that, but I do that. And this is a very low-cost platform. Unlike what it costs to do books, I mean, if you're going to self-publish, you're going to quickly find out what it costs to print books. But if you're going to have somebody do that for you, you can eliminate the cost on that side. And last thing, video, to me, has less a chance at establishing your expertise for the future. I've never been introduced, and I don't see a lot of people introduced as the star of a YouTube channel. Some do. It does happen, but it's very rare. It's harder because anyone can get a YouTube channel. The fact that you have one does not guarantee to the world, and the world does not see it, that you're possessing a YouTube channel, as any indication of expertise, because they also know that anyone can do this and everyone does. All right, so that's some of the positives and negatives of doing videos to reach the culture. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, I'll tell you why I think writing is positive as well.
Connect with Cold Case Christianity on social media. Visit the Cold Case Christianity homepage and click the social media icons on the top right toolbar. Jim is active on Facebook and Twitter, posting the best apologetics articles from over 250 Christian blogs around the country. You'll also find links to Jim's Instagram, Pinterest, and Google Plus accounts, along with the link to the Cold Case Christianity YouTube page. Stay connected with Cold Case Christianity and become a better Christian casemaker.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the flip side of this. What about writing, on the writing side of it? Is writing better than video? So I'll get to the end of that at the very end, but let's just talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of writing a book. A traditionally published book, not a self-published book. First of all, it takes time to write a book. I just finished a project that I'll be publishing in September that took me over 2 years to research, write, and illustrate. That's a long time project. You're not going to produce those every year. You're going to produce those every 2 or 3 years. So they are far more time consuming than creating videos. If you're the kind of person who likes an immediate response, get in the video world. The writing world, it takes more time. Second, it is vetted in a way that videos are not. Because in order to publish and have somebody else spend their money on your project, right? Get it published, hire the graphic artist, hire the marketing team, all of that. I don't have to pay for that stuff. That's done by my publisher. But that means they don't just do that for anybody. So the people who are in big publishing houses as authors, you probably know have already been vetted, because the people who are spending the money won't just sign anyone. Now, it doesn't mean you're anything special to be an author, don't get me wrong. But it does mean at least there's a level of some type of vetting before you probably are considered to be a reliable authority about some little niche-y thing. If, for example, my little niche-y thing is simply the rules of evidence in criminal trials. And for some crazy reason, these folks thought that was worth it, so they stepped out and risked their money on me. So you do have a chance to get vetted in a way that you won't be on YouTube. It's not your money you're spending, so that's the good thing. It's high cost, but it requires somebody else's investment, not yours, so that's an advantage. Also, people who consume your content in books, they thought that it was worth it enough to spend the money on the book. In other words, they have skin in the game, and don't underestimate that. When you watch a video, you've got no skin in the game. The video, all you have to do is just turn it on. And you can easily turn it off. You haven't invested any money up front, so you have no skin in the game. The people who read your books are far more interested, I find. For example, most people who buy a book, unless the book is really terrible, they read the whole book to see how it ends. But this is not always true of videos. Even the best videographers are lucky to get people who will just watch, or not just skim along, who will watch the entire video. Not everyone gets everyone to watch every minute of their video. So having skin in the game does help, because I think the audience you have is a more interested audience, and are far more likely on the backside to act on what it is you're teaching them in a book, if you ask me, than they necessarily are in a video. Authors have platform choices other than the one choice on Amazon. For example, you'll see in the new book, I've got a list of links to the 8 or 9 different platforms where books are sold, and there still are a bunch of platforms where books are sold, so you can reach different audiences. Most of us doing video, there's very few choices where to think about. This is almost a mega monopoly between Vimeo and YouTube. So that's the other thing. Writing a book is not grid or platform dependent. So I don't have to worry about in other words, if I'm out in a camping and I don't have an electrical grid or electrical power source, I can still read a book. And it's not platform dependent. So once I have the book in my hands, unless you're going to come and burn it, I can read the book whenever I want, and I can't be deplatformed from having the book. So that's an important thing. Also, it's pretty clear you can deep dive in a way in books that you can't on videos. Now look, I get it. It turns out that videos, because YouTube wants you to stay on the platform for as long as possible, they are actually rewarding long form videos. And there are many good, I can think of a couple right now, they're just great long form videographers who are doing long, even you'll see that some of the long podcasts now are 2 hours long. So I think long form is possible, of course, in video, but when I do the audio version of a book, that's usually like a 10-hour listen, 10 hours of listening to it. But the long form of books is dramatically longer than the long form of videos. And so if you want to deep dive, where you can actually go back and look at the references at the bottom and look at your endnotes and chase those endnotes down, there's really no way to get that level of research or that level of follow-up on video. Now, there are people who are putting those notes in the comment section, but even then, remember, long form video it's much shorter than long form book. So if you're looking for long-form expressions, books are still going to be better. There are no persistent ads. I don't know about you, but for me, video producers, and I've got ads on my videos too, but they're annoying. Are they not annoying? You're trying to recoup some of the cost of doing this work. I get it. I'm trying to do that too. I don't have any intermittent ads. I don't have sponsors that I'll talk about during the broadcast, because I think that is, for most people, annoying. They put up with it or they fast forward through it. You're not going to have that issue when you're working in books. You have their undivided attention while they have the book, right? Because there's no sidebar suggestions, there's no pop-up ads, there's no comments coming through, there's no distractions. Also, books survive whatever political or technical calamity falls on us, because you'll find books that were at one time had to be hidden, but books survive over generations, over centuries. That doesn't change. Also, I will just tell you this. there is a chance for evergreen on a book rather, that is not available to. So let's say you're talking about an evergreen topic on a video, a topic that'll still be important 20 years from now. You already know, looking at a video from 20 years ago, that thing is dated. Now, the written form of that is not dated. You could read that, you wouldn't even know when they wrote it. But when you see someone wearing this style, if the lapels are thin, the haircut's a certain style, there's this kind of background. Right now we're all using colored lights in our background. Eventually that'll stop. This is stupid, right? We're just all dating ourselves, because at some point we're all going to look and go, oh yeah, that's what they were doing 15 years ago. Next video, because it's not evergreen visually. It may be evergreen from a content perspective, but not visually. So that's one of the great things about books, is if you don't date them by putting in something that's time specific, well, you've got an evergreen book that will be the same 20 years from now as it is today. And that means that people are not going to discount what you're saying, because they realize, man, this dude's probably dead now. Because look at that video. It's ancient. Okay? So that's the whole point. This protects you from celebrity culture when you're writing books in a way that videos don't. And it also protects you from the immediate hostility that readers have when viewing others' comments. If you actually made a comment on some of these videos, you're like the nail that everyone's trying to hammer. Anyway, you are far more likely to establish your expertise and be introduced as the author of a book than you are to establish your expertise. The same way you're far more likely to be considered an expert if you have a nationally syndicated radio show rather than a podcast. And remember, that's part of the problem, is that everyone sees podcast hosts and YouTube hosts as a dime a dozen, because it's so easy to hop on that. Now, having said all that quickly, which of these do I prefer? I know it's a long way to get there, but I want you to see the ups and downs of both sides. Neither is better. Sorry. You got to do both. If you're an author, you need to be on YouTube. If you're a YouTuber, you need to at some point try to work toward authoring a book. Because I think that both of these strategies, I would never say, hey, I want to show you why you shouldn't be a YouTuber, because I'm an author primarily. But I do use YouTube. I do have not a great, huge audience yet on YouTube, but you can see we are consistently posting on YouTube. So I do that as well. But most of my effort is spent in this room writing. It's writing books. It's researching books. That's where I spend most of my time. But I would never say, oh, yeah, forget about YouTube. Just write books. No, I think both are necessary in a world where these two things accomplish two extremely different goals. One gives you immediacy, communicate visually with an audience, but it has all the downfalls all the pitfalls I just described for you. The other is, I think, it's long form and it's long term. It will survive any technological change, and you can hide your books if somebody comes after you, but you won't be able to hide the disengaged platform, which has now been turned off by the next regime. So it turns out, if you're looking for transcendency in your content, books are still going to be important. And so I think those are why I would say do both. Neither is more important than the other, and I would never make a case against one side or for the other. Both have their role to play. So get out there and start creating content. Yes, those of you who are watching and listening to this have the ability to create something visual and something we can listen to. It's your turn to take the lead. And I'll see you back here next week at Cold Case Christianity.
To hear more from J. Warner Wallace, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. For more information on this week's topic, visit youtube.com/coldcasechristianity with J. Warner Wallace. Thank you for joining us on this Cold Case Christianity broadcast.